Beaumont wakes suddenly in a cold sweat. The dream of the ghostly Lucy Hancock still in his mind, haunting his thoughts with her fearful cries. As he slowly regains his senses, he looks around, realizing he is no longer in the wilderness of Scrog's Bog. Where the bloody hell am I? He says to himself, before realizing that his hands are bound tightly with rope. In the gloom of the underground mining room, he can see Torinobu nearby, stirring awake also. Beaumont-san, where are we? I don't bloody know, old boy. The last thing I remember is bedding down for the night, and then I was having one of those awful dreams of that poor Lucy Hancock. You had the dream also. How very strange. I was also dreaming of her spirit begging for help. Suddenly, the two men turn as they hear a noise nearby in the darkness. Ugh, what are you two boys talking about? Comes the tired voice of a stranger on the ground nearby, his hands also bound. And just who are you, good sir? I'm Sheriff Merriweather from Setto's Mill. And just who are you? Beaumont Sinclair. They call me a gambler extraordinaire. Huh, that's a funny little rhyme there, Mr. English. And you? Torinobu Katsuhiro. I am here on a quest to avenge the... Yes, Torinobu, we don't have time for that. Well, you two boys just plain ran out of luck. I've been here for the last few days. I'd gone out to Scrog's Bog, investigating some of the missing townsfolk, and ended up here. I don't rightly know what these folk are up to, but it ain't no good. I've heard screams in the night, both from humans and, well, t'other things. The three men are suddenly taken off guard by a loud banging. They turn their attention in the direction of the noise, and see a pair of heavy doors barred at the end of a long passageway. The doors shake and groan as something smashes against them with great force. That doesn't sound too good, but lucky for you boys, I might have a way out of here for us. The idiots who captured me left me with my boot knife, but I ain't been able to use it on myself on account of it being in my boot, and I can't reach. Well, that's a spot of luck, old chap. Now that I'm here, they don't call me Quick Fingers Sinclair for no reason. Beaumont deftly reaches into the sheriff's boot and fishes out his knife. Then, with some of his gambler's tricks, Beaumont manages to slip his own hands free from his bonds, while Sheriff Merriweather takes the knife and gets to work sawing through his own bonds. What about me? Says Torinobu. Don't worry, Torinobu. I'll get you out of there. Beaumont is about to start untying Torinobu's wrists, when suddenly a sinister voice cuts through the dark.
Hey, they've set themselves free.
Beaumont looks over to see two men clad in black robes stood guard by the entrance to the chamber. Bloody hell, it's the Crimson Hand again. Be back in a moment, Torinobu, says Beaumont, before rushing towards the two guards, setting his sight on one of them, and with all his strength wrestling the man to the ground, gripping him by the throat and battering him unconscious. The other guard prepares to club Beaumont with the butt end of his rifle, but is thrown off balance as Sheriff Merriweather, now free of his bonds, hurls his throwing knife right into the shoulder of the Crimson Hand member, then charges in and with incredible strength bashes the man's head bloody against the rocks. Meanwhile, Torinobu grits his teeth and manages finally to escape from his bonds. As the three men catch their breath, they hear the large doors banging again, this time with greater force. Something is starting to break through. I think we best be getting out of here, says Sheriff Merriweather. You know what? I think you're right, Beaumont agrees, and heads through the doorway. He finds himself in a room with some great beast pit dug into the ground, an iron lattice imprisoning whatever is inside. A massive pit is carved into the centre of the floor here, with a makeshift gate covering the top. Whatever is down there, someone sure doesn't want it getting out. Beaumont decides it best to ignore this and keeps moving. Torinobu catches up and overtakes Beaumont, moving into the room, while Sheriff Merriweather takes the lead, pressing even deeper into the beast pit. As they make their way through the dark tunnels, a large group of the Crimson Hand suddenly walk through the doorway into the beast pit. They look at the 3 escaped prisoners in shock, and before they have time to react, Beaumont rushes forward and attacks one of them. Despite the odds, he manages to tip the scales and overpowers one of the Crimson Hand. With a mighty thump, he sends the man reeling back into his comrades, throwing them all off balance, whilst the injured cultist stumbles and falls through a gap in the iron lattice, disappearing into the pit below. Torinobu moves in to help, his Eastern martial arts delivering powerful strikes to one of the Crimson Hand, and then Sheriff Merriweather joins in. The big man's fists rain heavy blows that knock the Crimson Hand unconscious, and with unexpected speed, he hurls his boot knife directly into the throat of another of the occultists, leaving him gasping his last breaths on the floor. The remaining members of the Crimson Hand recover their wits and charge in for the attack on all 3 of the men. Beaumont takes a nasty hit as one of the occultists clubs him in the side with his rifle and knocks the wind out of the gambler, while both Torinobu and Merriweather manage to defend against their attackers, turning their blows aside and remaining unharmed. Beaumont manages to recover his breath and doubles down in his fight with the occultist. Fortune favours him, and he manages to grab a loose rock and bring it down on the man's skull, bashing his head open and leaving him twitching on the ground. Torinobu, meanwhile, fights off 2 of the Crimson Hand. His hands chop like knives and his legs kick like thunder, and one precise strike catches an occultist directly in the throat and crushes his windpipe, causing him to crumple to the ground in a heap, gasping for air. Merriweather continues to fight with his incredible strength and subdues another of the occultists, bringing the 2 sides of the conflict to 3 men apiece. Seeing so many of their comrades fall, the Crimson Hand are visibly shaken, but do not hesitate to resume their attack. This time, both Merriweather and Torinobu are caught off guard by their assailants and left reeling from their hefty strikes. Beaumont, beginning to feel the ache in his muscles, summons one last burst of strength and throws himself at the nearest member of the Crimson Hand, sending them both crashing to the ground. He grips the cultist's skull and begins battering it against the rocky floor until finally the man stops moving. Torinobu grabs the wrists of the occultist near to him and flips the man up head over heels and brings him crashing down onto the metal grate, and with a well-placed stamp of his foot puts an end to his sinister ways. The last member of the Crimson Hand is filled with fear and is about to beg for mercy, but doesn't get the chance as Sheriff Merriweather makes short work of him. Bloody hell, we won't last too much longer against gangs of them like that, says Beaumont. We need to find out what they did with all our gear. It's not far from here. I seen where they stashed it when they brung me in this place. Then please, lead the way, Merriweather-san. The sheriff prepares to lead the 2 men onwards, when suddenly a flood of bats come flying and screeching into the chamber before passing on deeper into the caverns. All 3 men are shaken by the ill omen of the bat swarm, but they soon steel their nerves and prepare to press on. Torinobu leads the way into the next room and is shocked to see it is filled with sickly-looking green eggs. The passage is covered in thick, sticky mucus, and large egg pods line the walls and floor. What are these things? Says Torinobu, as Merriweather comes up beside him. I recognize these things. They're hellbat eggs, says Merriweather. Just bloody marvellous. Hellbats, that's just what we need. Beaumont mutters to himself. Be careful in here. These things have a tendency to... Before Merriweather can finish, one of the hellbat eggs bursts, spattering him with burning acid that dissolves the sleeve of his coat and leaves him with a nasty caustic burn. Damned things, he says, stamping on the small creature within the egg. Like I said, watch yourself through here. Gonna have to be extra careful. This is where they got our gear stashed. So mind you don't touch anything that you don't need. Suddenly, they hear the low whining of a beast. They prepare themselves for the fight to come, and in the distance, they see a shape move in the dark. It rushes towards them, and as it moves into the light, they see it is none other than Swampy.
"Ah, Swampy, daijoubu desu ka?"
says Torinobu. That your dog, mister?
"Yes, this is a Swampy, a faithful companion."
The dog barks happily. Well, it's damn good to see you're all right, boy. I had no idea what those thugs had done with you, and to be honest, I feared the worst, Beaumont says, petting the dog's head. Swampy whines and raises his paw to reveal it has been shackled with a rusty old iron manacle. A length of chain pegged to the ground prevents the dog from moving too far. No doubt the Crimson Hand had intended for poor Swampy to be the first meal of the hatchling hellbats.
"Just a moment, Swampy-san,"
says Torinobu as he finds and retrieves his equipment. With one quick slice of his katana, the rusty old manacle falls free of the dog, and Swampy wags his tail happily. The three men gather up their equipment and prepare to make good on their escape. When suddenly, they hear a scurrying in the corner of the room. Sheriff Merriweather charges into the shadows and drags a teenage girl into the light. "No," she shouts, squirming and kicking. "I'm not joining your cult. I want to go home." "Now hold on there, girl. Do we look like members of this cult?" says Merriweather, struggling to stop the girl squirming and fighting. Torinobu seizes the girl's shoulder gently but firmly, and she stops fighting almost immediately.
"Are you Lucy Hancock?"
the samurai asks. "I don't know who that is. My name's Sally Mason."
"Well, Miss Mason, if you want to get out of here, I'd suggest you come with us."
"Fine. But if we run into any more of those black-robed freaks, I'm gonna kill them for what they did to my ma and pa." "Come on, let's get moving before any more of those black-robed freaks turn up," says Beaumont, then moves quickly through the abandoned mines, avoiding the hellbat eggs and heading towards one of the room's exits. He finds himself in a big room with shafts of light coming through gaps in the wall. The ceiling here is broken out in places, with shafts of light spilling down into the room. Beaumont's spirits are lifted slightly at the hope that all is not lost. Not yet. He grits his teeth and prepares to move further into the room, hoping this is the way out. Torinobu, meanwhile, heads to another one of the exits from the Hellbat hatchery and finds himself entering some kind of lost army war room. The chamber appears to be a military war room of some sort. Ammunition crates line the walls, and an old wooden table is covered in maps and plans for sieging a town. There is also a large chest covered in glowing green runes and sigils.
"What secrets does this hold?"
Torinobu wonders to himself. The samurai manages to get the chest open and finds a stash of dark stone and money, no doubt looted from the poor victims of the Order of the Crimson Hand. He also takes a bolt-action rifle propped against the wall. The weapon looks well maintained, and Torinobu thinks Beaumont may be able to get some use out of the weapon. Swampy, seeing his masters exploring the caverns, decides to join in and searches the final exit to the hatchery, coming across a set of submerged tracks. From the dim glow of the lantern's light nearby, Swampy can see the shimmering reflections of water up ahead. The passage here seems to have flooded. As Swampy stares out at the black water, something under the surface catches the dog's eye, and it steps back and begins to growl. Suddenly, out of the water burst 6 massive writhing tentacles, no doubt horrors summoned by the Order of the Crimson Hand. Beaumont hears his dog's plight and comes running to aid him. Seeing the horrible writhing monstrosities, he wastes no time and unloads on them with his shotgun. Blasting one of them apart into shreds of mucus and sinew, then takes a follow-up shot with his holdout pistol. and leaves another one of the bulky appendages sinking back into the flooded chamber. Torinobu quickly joins the fray, gritting his teeth and putting on an extra burst of speed to reach the creatures. His swords slash out and leave two of them twitching on the ground in pieces. Not to be outdone, Swampy runs in and begins biting and gnawing at one of the remaining tentacles. But its thick muscle proves too difficult for him to chew through. Sheriff Merriweather moves up towards Beaumont, with Sally Mason at his side. The sheriff pulls his pistol and fires 3 quick shots that leave another of the tentacles in a bloody mess. The remaining tentacle attempts to wrap around Swampy, but the agile dog manages to slip free of its grasp. Sheriff Merriweather, you go and help Torinobu finish off that braggart. I think I found our way out. I'm just going to go and check up ahead.
All right, you take care of yourself.
Beaumont heads back into the big room, hoping to find the way out of the mines and away from this occultist order that he is quickly becoming sick of. Meanwhile, Torinobu wastes no time dispatching the last of the tentacles, slicing it cleanly into pieces.
You are a brave little Inu,
he says to Swampy, as the dog pulls hungrily at the meat of the tentacle.
But I do not think you want to eat that,
he says, leading the dog away from the mangled abomination. As Beaumont explores the big room, he finds that it looks as though someone has been digging into the wall. Tools and rocks litter the floor, and a strange object rests half buried in stone. Dust still hangs in the air, and torches burn on the ground. Someone was just here, digging this out. Beaumont decides it's best to ignore the excavation for now, as escape is the more pressing matter. Meanwhile, back in the flooded chamber, Torinobu feels there is a watcher in the dark. Something's not right here. The dark shadows on the far end of the room seem to be moving and twisting.
What madness is this, sir?
He feels, suddenly, tearing at his body and soul, the angry spirits of the past, jealously clawing and scratching at the life they can no longer enjoy. And Torinobu knows, in some capacity, the ghost of Noriko Yamada is with him in this place. Beaumont sees up ahead in the big room, daylight spilling in through the entrance to the mines. He has found the exit, but before he can tell the others, suddenly more of the Crimson Hand flood in and he is surrounded. But to make matters worse, out of the ground erupt more of the tentacles, these ones bulkier and more aggressive looking. In the distance, he hears Torinobu's battle cry, understanding that wherever he is, the samurai is also under attack. The sound of the war cry emboldens him, and with every trick at his disposal, makes short work of the tentacle. Then, before the ambushing Crimson Hand can react, he draws his shotgun. One of them goes down and does not get back up. Meanwhile, off in the darkness, Torinobu unleashes a deadly attack on a tentacle ambushing him and slices it to pieces, while Swampy races off in search of new prey towards Beaumont. The Crimson Hand gather their wits and begin their attack, opening fire on Beaumont before rushing him, their rifles raised like clubs in the air. But Beaumont, prepared for the attack, manages to sidestep their strikes and leave the two cultists reeling, while a third races past him, going after Sheriff Merriweather and Sally Mason. Merriweather finds himself surrounded as more of the Crimson Hand rush in, and a tentacle, bursting through the ground, strikes out at him. He pushes Sally Mason into an alcove in the corner of the room, shielding her with his body. He opens fire with his pistol, while Swampy charges the tentacle, and amidst a hail of bullets and gnashing teeth, one of the Crimson Hand falls backwards, his body punched through with lead, and the tentacle slumps to the ground, riddled with bullet holes and bite marks. The cacophony of noise brought on by the combat shakes the very foundations of the mines, and rocks tumble from overhead, smashing into both Beaumont and Sheriff Merriweather. leaving them battered and bleeding. Beaumont grunts in pain and continues his fight against the Order of the Crimson Hand. And leaves another of the black-robed occultists dead on the ground. Meanwhile, Torinobu catches up to Swampy and draws his swords, ready to aid the dog and the sheriff in their fight against the occultists. Sally Mason screams from the alcove, "Let me at them! I'll kill them! I'll kill them for what they did to my ma and pa!"
Settle down there, Missy. We got some work to do,
says Merryweather. Torinobu slices at the cultist, attacking Swampy. Leaving long, deep cuts in the man's body, but failing to land a kill strike. Swampy has no such failure though, as the dog leaps at the distracted man and tears out his throat. The member of the Crimson Hand fighting Merryweather raises his rifle, and the sheriff realizes at the last moment that the evil cultist is taking aim at Sally Mason, planning to kill the child, probably knowing she will be easier prey than the others. As he squeezes the trigger, Merryweather jumps in the path of the bullet, and it punches straight through his chest and out of his back, splattering Sally Mason with hot blood. The girl screams in horror as Merryweather collapses to the ground, his breathing laboured and heavy. Meanwhile, in the big room, Beaumont turns his shotgun on the last of the cultists guarding the exit and opens fire, blowing them apart. With the room clear of enemies, he prepares to find Torinobu and Merryweather and Sally Mason and lead them to safety, unaware of what is transpiring in the Hellbat hatchery. The final cultist pulls back the bolt on his rifle, loading another round and preparing to dispatch Sally Mason. The defenseless girl is frozen in horror, but before the cultist gets a chance to pull the trigger, Torinobu rushes in from his side and swings his swords, slicing the man to pieces and leaving the room in silence but for the heavy, laboured breathing of Sheriff Merryweather.
Merryweather-san,
Torinobu says, sorrowfully, knowing there is nothing he can do for the sheriff.
Don't you worry about me. You take that girl and get her to safety. Take her to Seto's mill. Here, take take my badge. Give it to my deputies. Tell them I've done for the bastards who've been kidnapping our townsfolk. I will honor your wish,
says Torinobu, taking the tin badge from the sheriff. Then Merryweather heaves out one last breath and lies still. They killed him. They killed him and my parents.
He saved you. These men are very dangerous. We must go now, Sally Mason. We will return you to Seto's mill, where you will be safe.
I'm gonna kill these cult freaks. I don't care what it takes. They're evil. If it's the last thing I do with my life, I'll put an end to their evil cult.
We must go now. We do not have time to waste in this place. Let's go.
Torinobu takes Sally and meets up with Beaumont. Where's Merryweather? Torinobu simply shakes his head. Bloody hell, they got him? Damn these ghastly buggers. I'm going to get them. I'm going to get them all. That's the spirit, young lady. I'm sure you will. But right now, let's get out of here. Who knows how many more of them are in this place. And so Beaumont, Torinobu, and Swampy leave the Order of the Crimson Hand's hideout in Scrog's Bog with the orphan girl, Sally Mason,